Hello and welcome to another episode of Taking Back Saturday, a Happy Buyers Club podcast where we break down the real estate market each and every Friday and help home buyers buy with confidence, follow a process, and hopefully buy really happy. Today, I'm joined by the guy who, and I only told him this 20 minutes ago, I followed all the way back from when I was living in London, and who, aside from being a buyer's agent, has the business name that very clearly speaks to me on a personal level. And he's very clearly great at what he does. His business grows from strength to strength, and they're one of the few teams that when we run into them, we genuinely welcome the chat and the catch up. We want to see these guys win just as much as us. Jacob Butler from Hunter Gather, welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate the kind words.
Well, they're all very true. You were telling me before, while we were sort of enjoying a water and a coffee and a merch swap, that you've been in buyer's agency for 6 years, 4 of those.
Yeah, 6.5 years.
As Hunter Gather?
Yep.
How's it changed in that time?
It's changed a lot. So when I started, it was 6.5 years ago when I started, I'd say 80% of the people I spoke with had never heard of a buyer's agent.
Yep.
That included sometimes the real estate agents themselves as well. Whereas I'd say now it's like 80-90% of people have heard of a buyer's agent. They might not have used one, but there's a general understanding of, what a buyer's agent actually does in the market. Yeah. So it's been a big shift. I think the agents themselves have also changed as well, which was one of the reasons why I moved across to being a buyer's agent in the first place. So when I started as a sales agent, I remember talking to one of the older agents in the office and I said, hey, here's a contract and on it says buyer's agent. Like, what is a buyer's agent? He goes, don't worry about it. He goes, we just don't deal with them. He goes, they just want to split your comm. And I was like, oh, okay. But then over probably about a 12, 18 month period, I saw the perception of buyer's agents changing even just in the office that I was at. And that same agent actually coming to me going, mate, I've just listed a property. Can you invite all the buyer's agents to come to a VIP and get them through as well? So yeah, I started doing more deals with buyer's agents. And then the more that I tried to learn about what a buyer's agent did, how I could probably implement what a buyer's agent does as a sales agent in terms of servicing buyers and working more closely with them, I actually just realized that buyer's agency was the better route to go down.
More fun.
Yeah, jumped over and haven't looked back.
People often ask the same question of us, like, why did you do this rather than keep selling or go back into selling? And I describe it as it's harder work, but it's way more fun.
Yeah. Call it the bright side of real estate.
Yeah, nice. I like that. The bright side of real estate. That's good. That can be the name of this episode. Have you seen, so you're coming back, let's say 6.5 years ago, the public didn't understand what a buyer's agent, and I promise to everyone listening, this won't be a conversation about buyer's agency through and through. But I am interested, like, we are a much newer business than yours. We've probably decided to enter the market with a bit of momentum behind it. We've never really had the question of what is a buyer's agent. Do you think that because the perception has changed, it's been a good thing for you guys? Or are you facing a bit like a real estate agent now where it's like you all do the same thing? What's the difference? Or there's been a negative experience or a negative connotation with buyer's agents out there? Because you guys probably experienced this too. We go on open home on the weekend and people give us weird looks like, oh, you're here to take the property away from me, whereas we're just there facilitating a service for our own clients.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say kind of all of those things. There's definitely more competition from buyer's agents out there, but I think that the more people doing it and doing it well actually helps buyer's agency as a whole.
Yeah.
So I don't see it as a bad thing. Obviously, there are some operators out there that, similar to sales or similar to doctors, there's always good and bad in kind of every industry.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes that helps us actually stand apart. So, there's things that we know that we offer that others in the market might not be able to as well. So we just leverage that.
Cool.
Yeah,
all right.
Leverage the experience as well.
I think that's what it is, right? We're a service provider more than anything else. And the level of experience you can provide people who are engaging your services, but people from the outside looking in as well, I think makes a big difference to, like, we don't have any delusions of grandeur of changing a perception of a whole industry, but if we can make it suck less for one party at one time, I think it does make all the difference to how people perceive, like, real estate sucks is like a tagline of ours.
Yeah.
Because it does for a lot of people out there. So our job, and I think a lot of sales agents' jobs as well, is to go above and beyond to try and make it suck a little bit less.
Buying a property should be an enjoyable experience. It shouldn't be stressful. And I think most buyers find it actually stressful. And that's one of the things that, they don't enjoy about the process. So one of the things that we then always say to people is like, we'll take the stress out of it. we'll, take time out of it, but we'll also make it enjoyable and you actually enjoy the process and find some fun back in it as well. One of the things that I always say to clients is like, our business is not a sales business. Our business is a consultancy, and people either want our help or they don't. So I don't feel like on what we're doing, we're pushing ourselves onto people the same way the sales do, but we're really just trying to give people the right tools to be able to, go into the market, find the properties and get what they want.
You said before buying houses is a stressful experience for a lot of people. Why?
I think that even though there's more resources or platforms and tools and information out there for people, I don't think it's easier to buy. I think that there's increased competition in the market. I think there's analysis paralysis that happens from people. It's not that they're just looking at, what suburb, or not suburbs, but what properties are available in the window at the local real estate agency. It's almost sometimes there's too much out there and then they don't know which way to go with things. But yeah, I just think that people really struggle, but people are probably more time poor in general. I'd say all of our clients in different ways are time poor. So having the time to run around, chase real estate agents, trying to understand the market and cultivate relationships with everyone out there, they just don't have the time to do it, or it's not the best use of their time. So they find that particularly stressful, especially also when the market's changing, whether it's going up or down. People don't want to be sitting on the sidelines for too long as well. We had a lady come to us recently we bought a property for. She had tried to buy over the last 18 months, 16 properties.
Wow.
Her own, like actually written offers on 16 properties and just kept missing out.
That is uncommon.
Yeah. Combination of things, like sometimes it was price, sometimes it was timing, sometimes it was just being used by the agent. But there was one particular agent, 3 separate occasions was like, you've got this, just give me X and we'll get it over the line, and then it'd sell for $200,000-$300,000 more. And she had a budget of, circa $1 million. So we're not talking like, millions, and it's a tiny little bit of a,
so 30% change.
Yeah. But he was just using her to then get higher offers. And so she was finding that process stressful, but then she was also getting to the point of frustration and, we call it buy fatigue, but getting to the end of it where she was like, I'll buy anything. And we're like, we don't want you to do
That's dangerous.
Yeah. So like, I remember when she walked out of the office and I said to Lily and my team, I'm like, we need to help her. Like, I'm actually genuinely worried that if she goes out and doesn't use us, she's going to buy the wrong property.
There's a lot of people that find that. I think we had a bit of a laugh about it when we were talking before, but we don't find a lot of people at their aspirational, emotional best when they start talking to us. Like you find people at a point where they are then suddenly prepared to have that value exchange of, I'll take my time back for a fee for you guys to go out and help me make good decisions.
Yeah.
What do you say to somebody who's potentially not in a position to use a buyer's agent? I'm going to ask you a question about the market in a second too, because I think it's important we sort of address that, the nature of ups and downs and cycles. But what do you say to somebody who is maybe not in a position to use a buyer's agent, but is getting that feeling of not another Saturday? Like the last thing I want to do on my Saturday is go on over home at 10:15 a.m.
I think patience is still key. It's probably one of the biggest things that I instill in the buyers that we're working with. Like, I'd rather take longer and buy the right property than rush and buy the wrong one. And so like we see it where, as I said before, like if people are getting to that point of frustration in the market, they end up usually doing one of 3 things. So one is that they give up and they say, this is too hard, let's just stay put. And whether that's, in the house that they're already in, or, let's just get into a rental and we'll sit for 6 months or 12 months and then see what happens. I tend to find those people generally look for a reason why it's okay not to buy. Like they're actually just putting themselves out of misery and they go, the market's difficult or it's changing or COVID's doing X or interest rates are doing Y, and they create a reason why it's okay not to buy now, but really they're just putting themselves out of short-term pain. The second one that a lot of them people do when they're in that situation is they find a property, but maybe it only ticks 6 out of 10 boxes, and then they compromise on what it is that they want just to buy. They go, I know I want it to be over here and I wanted 600 square meters and it had to be X, Y, and Z. Here's a property, not in the right location. It's on a 400, but we'll only be there for 3 years.
I'm in the market.
Yeah.
Everyone else I know is bought already.
And then we don't have to do this anymore for a period of time. And then when the kids are a little bit older, then we'll get the right property, or, that again, they find a reason why it's okay to compromise. And I think there's some of those buyers that you see then sell 6 months, 12 months, even, 2 years later, because they were never happy with what they actually bought. For But it's generally the wrong decision as well, because you tear up a lot of money with stamp duty and agent fees and things just to undo that bad decision. But then the third thing that we see lots of buyers do when they're on their own in the market and they're frustrated is go, here's a property that I really like. I think it's worth X. Let's say I think it's worth $1 million, but if I pay 1.1 or 1.2, I'll get it.
Yeah.
But at least then we're out of the market, and then it's somebody else's problem after that. They know they're overpaying. They know that they're probably stuffing over somebody else because that's going to be the new benchmark for a sale. But they're like, doesn't matter. It won't be me.
And that brings problems into the future. So if there's a lifestyle change within a relatively short period of time, and I mean sub 5 years.
Correct. And most of the time they try to rationalize and go, but we're going to be there for 10 years. For sure. And the market's going to grow and the Olympics are doing X and
Brisbane golden decade.
They try to find a reason why it's okay. But again, we've seen it plenty of times where people on their own have bought something overpaid, and then, as you said, job change or circumstance change, and then they need to undo it. And they're the ones that are tearing up money to make the move. There
is a real 2-year itch in Brisbane. And there has been, it's not just I think the scenario you've just described of let's just buy anything has been really prevalent for the last 4 or 5 years. But for, let's say, the last decade, there's a real 2-year itch. So people would always used to say, we'll move house every 7 years or whatever it is, closer to 20 years in Australia and even longer in Brisbane. And that's because of stamp duty and agents fees. Like, it's cost you 150 grand just to move house. It's a hell of a lot of money. So make the right decision early. Like you said, be patient, buy the right thing, even if it takes longer. But in Brisbane particularly, when we find a new client, we'll go and look at what sold that they want to live in that would be worth their budget today 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And we'll go and talk to the agents that sold those and say, have you spoken to Steve and Mary? No, I haven't spoken to them for a couple of years. Well, go and see what happens. Every single time there's at least one where they're like, it's funny you called. We're really thinking about whether it's mortgage stress because things have changed recently. That's a very this market conversation. But usually it's lifestyle changes, job changes. Didn't actually like the house. So a lot of people buy houses after only ever being in there for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And 2 years is a lot longer than 20 minutes. And you find out that you don't like where the sun sets in summer.
Yeah.
Or you bought a house with a big block of land, but you hate mowing your lawns or whatever it might be. And it seems to be that 2 years when people can justify ripping up that moving expense to go and then compromise less. Like we talk about real estate, good decisions still involve compromise, but it's not, you wouldn't buy the 6 out of 10. If it gets to a 7 out of 10, start trying to rationalize it.
Yeah, can you turn a 7 or an 8 into a 9 or 10?
For sure.
By doing certain things to it. The other one in that list is divorce. We've seen heaps of divorce in the last, I'd say 3 years since COVID, where, again, people have bought these houses, great intentions to be there for forever, and then we've come in and picked them up off market for our clients because there's been a situation change in the background, and generally, people want to get out of that, and sometimes we'll tear up money to make that happen as well. So yeah, it's part of our process when we sit down with a new client, we do a strategy session and ask them to show us examples of things that sold 2 years ago, 3 years ago that they'd buy if they, if they could. And sort of as you've said, we've actually bought those properties that have been on that list because something has changed in the background, and an opportunity has come up where we can pick it up for our clients.
It's I think for something there again, for anybody who's listening to this and you are out there doing it yourself, it's a good question to ask. It's just like, hey, what did you sell 2 years ago that you think might suit me? Or you're at an open home on the weekend and maybe it's for you, maybe it's not. But it's just like, have you sold anything like this in the last few years and what are they doing?
You need to, for buyers that are out there on their own, you need to try to paint a picture for the agents that you're talking to about what it is that you actually like. So giving them real examples of things that have transacted recently where, a year ago, 2 years ago. If you just say to them, we're looking for a house and it needs to be on 600 square meters and it's in the inner east, they'll go, okay, great.
Yeah.
But if you said, I missed out on this one, it was on this particular street, it was north facing, it was a character home, it had a pool, blah, 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 and give them all the details, they'd go, actually, I think I might have something for you. You need to paint the picture for them so then they've got something to latch onto.
Yeah. Help them help you. It tells them the names of people to call, not just the type of property to go and look at.
Yep.
On that note, so let's say we're talking about something that sold 2 years ago. There's a high chance it's probably worth more than they paid 2 years ago because Brisbane's been in a pretty consistent and until, let's say, the last quarter, very rapid growth cycle. I think we both agree that it's still growing, but it's probably a fairer market now than it has been for a really long time. The media will tell you there's more listings on the market now than there has been, but they'll generalize that as what realestate.com is saying, that there's more listings on the market now than there has been in a long time, whereas Brisbane's still pretty tight, particularly
Still sitting at like 25% of the stock from 3 years ago.
for sure. And that's Brisbane. Whereas you look at Sydney and Melbourne, their stock levels are up, and the news just reports that stock levels are up. And it's we sort of talk about media reporting as you take it with a grain of salt, and then you try and find a bucket of context. And it's hopefully the way you listen to things like this and are going out and getting your own information, because it is tight, and that is why prices are going one way. And I expect them to probably continue to go one way at a varying pace. 2 questions. How do you feel about the current market? And then if you've got somebody, we're recording this on the 4th of November, so it's going to be Melbourne Cup Day tomorrow. This episode will come out a week after we record this. There's a saying in real estate that nothing much happens after Melbourne Cup Day. It's like the first piss up of the season. If you're talking to somebody or anyone who's listening to this and they made a decision, we want to buy a house before the end of the year, and they made that in September and they haven't found the right one now, mid-November, what do you say to them? What's the advice that you give to them about, 1, the market and how you're feeling about it now, and 2, how do they best get a result between now and Christmas, or how do they confidently put the cure in the rack and set things up for a really good start to the new year?
Yeah, so I put out a video last week on our socials talking about this as well. The market moves. There is seasonality in what happens in the market every single year. Whether the market's going up or down, there is still a volume seasonality that happens every single year. Most good agents will be saying to their vendors, if you're not on the market by sort of next week, maybe even the week after, don't list your property this side of the year. So what tends to happen is you might see a little bit of a rush of property coming to the market over the next week or 2, but then probably about the second week of November, it's going to be a rapid decline all the way through to about Christmas. Some of those properties that are then getting signed up by agents, the agents will be saying, let's do a soft launch. We'll put it on REA.
We'll tell buyers agents.
Yeah, but we'll get it up on Boxing Day, or we'll launch it, 1st of Jan. So there is a little bit of a wave that will come, but what tends to happen is buyers also start to mentally check out, most buyers, not all, and will say, we're going to wait until the new year because there's going to be fresh stock in the market. Let's take a bit of a break. We've been doing this for a while. Let's sit, let's enjoy the festive season, and then we'll come back hard in the new year. And what tends to happen is, whilst there's more property that comes in January, there's also this whole other wave of buyers that
spike in pricing.
Yeah, every single year. When I was in sales, we had an REA rep come in and show us the data, and the number 1 day for surge volume on realestate.com.au is Boxing Day, because everyone's got through Christmas, they're, sitting on the couch, they're relaxed, and they go, let's have a look.
How do I live further away from my family, or how do I live closer to my family?
So that happens. But what we tend to find is we're still busy all the way up into probably about the second week of December. There's still properties that we purchased over that Christmas period as well. But there is a spike in off-market or pre-market opportunities. So, whilst properties on market start rapidly declining, the number of pre-market or off-market opportunities start to increase. And so for our buyers, we tend to find that there's more out there. So, if you're a buyer out there in the market, maybe it is having those conversations with agents and saying you are still active. And if something comes across that matches your criteria, to reach out to them, because the reality is they've probably got things signed, ready to go for the new year, where it's a genuine seller who will sell. But it's just a timing issue for sure when they launch.
We bought 2 properties on the 22nd of December last year, and they came off the back of, what have you got signed up that you're launching before Australia Day?
Yeah.
And it was a case of these people didn't want to go to Christmas lunch and talk about the fact that we're thinking about selling a house. They wanted to almost brag that we sold our house, we sold it off market, we got a great result, whatever it might be. And I think if you look back at Brisbane historically, October, November are the most expensive months to buy in Brisbane. Like, prices tend to have a little bit north of them because there's this mentality of we want to be in for Christmas, but December is a month of opportunity. And exactly as to your point, it's the conversation or the text message to send to those agencies. Hey, what are you launching in January that we could see prior? We've got a bit more time off work. I'm only doing 4 days in December, whatever it might be. And there will be something that they'll show you, because there will be a client that's like, hey, let's do it the right way. But if you get it on in the meantime, I will sign the piece of paper so you can talk about my property.
Yeah. I bought one of the properties I own in Bulimba on New Year's Eve 2020. Nice. The agent was getting it ready to go to market, had told the owner that they needed to, get it painted, get it cleaned up and do everything to it. So the owner was looking at my holidays is now going to be prepping a property for sale. It was a separation as well. So one of them was left to do it all on their own. And we were like, well, here's an offer. We'll give you time and flexibility to then get out. And so that was the thing that made a difference, was then, the owner not having to spend their holidays prepping a home for sale. They knew that they were probably taking a little bit less than what they'd get if they went to market, but it was an easy decision for them to do it.
I think it's worth something as well. Like even if you're not extracting every last dollar, if you can put a slightly better than fair price forward that solves problem. We always talk about problem solving. That's the key, right? Price is the last thing that you worry about. If you can understand exactly what those people need and you can satisfy every single one, then you give yourself the option to negotiate on price. And sometimes that's buyers start there without actually understanding the scenario. I think you're exactly right. Like that's a good deal for everybody. Everyone's got certainty. Everyone can enjoy the festive season without thinking like, oh, we've got to go back to this next year.
Buyers and sellers want the same thing, which is certainty. And a lot of the time, even in this market, vendors actually want time. So just getting them on the market and getting, a quick sale and then settling in 30 days is not what the vendors want. We've tested it multiple times this year where we've gone to agents, with an offer from our buyer and we've said, here's 2 offers. So, I know you want X. Here's an offer. It's not quite what you want, but we want to settle in 30 days or 45 days. Or here's another offer from the same buyer. It's a little bit less again on price, but we're going to give you 6 months to settle. But you can bring that forward by just giving us 30 days notice. And in every case bar one, the vendor's taken less money for the certainty of time. And then the really interesting thing is, in most cases, that settlement's actually still been brought forward to somewhere around 45, 60 days anyway.
Because they've got the certainty to go out and make a decision.
Correct.
Yeah.
They know what money they're shopping with. The vendor is committed to the sale, and then they start getting serious about selling. But there's this chicken and egg thing that's happening in the market where you've got people who want to sell but won't because they can't find what they want. And the reason why they can't find what they want is because somebody else won't put their property on the market. So it just keeps going round and round and spiraling.
And then you've got agents in the middle who almost flat out refuse to entertain a subject to sale 9 times out of 10. We've seen it this year where we've been able to get across the line. We've also made offers where we've had sub to sale and they've just said flat no. And so we've had clients who are prepared to take the risk. We've had most clients happy to walk away at that point because they just don't want to put themselves under that pressure. And I ask you a question about the dual offer thing, because I think one of the things that when we talk to other buyers agents on this show, it gives us the opportunity to bring other opinions to an audience. It shouldn't just be Chase and I telling everybody what we think to be right. You found a house you like. You've made an offer. You're in the midst of negotiating. What advice would you give a buyer when it comes to negotiating? Because I think there's a perception that it's us versus them. Sometimes it is. Hopefully most of the time it's not. What's your 2 cents on how they can go about getting a better outcome and having a better experience when they get to the crunch?
Try to understand what it is that the vendor wants. Like, price is obviously important. Everybody wants to get a good price, but sort of as we said before, it's not the only thing that people are thinking about. Terms are equally as important, and trying to understand what the vendor is trying to achieve is really important in there. I think one of the things that, probably makes us good at what we do is that we have been on the sales side. We've sat in rooms with a vendor when they've been looking at an offer and deciding whether or not to sell or running through that process. Whereas if you're a buyer or a buyer's agent who's never been through that, you don't understand the emotion that goes through a vendor's mind when thinking about selling. And it's actually good. I went through it 12 months ago and sold something, and it's actually good to be a vendor.
Felt those feelings
again?
again?
To feel the feelings and actually go through it, because people do weird things when they're selling a property and they get emotional about it.
Selling a house, I think, is harder emotionally than buying one because you feel like you have something to lose.
Yeah.
And you also feel like you're losing these intangible things. Like you feel like you're losing memories, right? Because particularly if you're selling a house that you've been in for a really long time. We saw it off marketplace last week in Holland Park, and the sellers were there, and the agent was just like, "Don't talk to them." And I was like, "That'll make it more weird." And so I was just like, "You guys okay?" And they're like, "Yeah, we're really emotional." I was like, "I get it. Like, look at the beautiful gallery wall that you have of your children that now have kids of their own. Like, this is a big deal. Thanks for having me." And they're shitting the bed because they have everything in their mind, at least everything to lose. And so, if we decide that we want to make an offer on that, how do we help them feel good feelings?
Yeah. So going back to your question, I think trying to understand the vendor and what they're going through is a really big part of it. Knowing when to push and knowing when to be patient is another big piece of it too, because just going in hammer and tong and trying to ram an offer down someone's throat when they're not ready to accept it isn't going to happen. And I think that's where a lot of people come unstuck. It's like, well, I made the offer. Why haven't they accepted it? there's a lot of things going on sometimes in the background that need to be worked through. So understanding that and being able to communicate with the agent and being patient where need be can make a big difference as well.
How do you know when to push and when to hold back? Are there common telltale signs? I know it's a really general question and it's probably very situation specific, but you got to give something.
It is a hard one. I think sometimes it does come down to knowing the agent and knowing whether they're being transparent or whether they're playing games as well. That is a hard one to know. But I think the easiest way to unpack that is to just ask more questions and ask good questions. And it's not just, well, what's the vendor? Where are they moving to? It's like actually trying to understand the situation and what might be going on, because you might find something in that line of questions that you go, oh, now I actually understand why the vendor's selling or what they're trying to achieve. How can I rearrange things on my end to try to make that work? So better questions is probably a big piece of it. And not being, I think a lot of people just think that the agent is out to get them all the time. And so they'll be very abrasive in the way that they deal with an agent. So just don't. Try to work with them where possible.
I like that. One of the questions that we try and ask is how long have they had a relationship with their client? So how long has the agent known the vendor? If they've known them for years, then you know that agent's understood their circumstances over a very broad period of time, cared enough to stay in touch, probably set a campaign up from months in advance to get to a point, versus they had me in last week and we've listed it. To me, that says that the seller is usually more motivated by price than anything else. There's a reason that they're moving and they may need to make a quick decision, or maybe they're making a decision based on an expectation that potentially isn't there in the marketplace, versus an agent who's held their hand and set things up to get a really great result, but probably managed expectations better as well. And I think for anybody listening, that's a really simple question to ask, and they'll tell you most of the time anyway. I said we'd only go for 25 minutes. We're going for 26 minutes. So I'm going to ask you one more question and then I'll get you out of here. By the time this comes out, there's 6 weeks left in the year. If I want to buy a house between now and say the 13th of December, which is the last day of public school here in Queensland, what do I do? What's your one tip to get a result in the next, say, 4 weeks?
I think just go hard. Like push. You need to be talking to as many agents as possible, getting in front of as many agents as possible in the areas that you want to buy in. A lot of agents will start mentally packing down from, as we said, Melbourne Cup. I think it's more of a mental thing than anything else. They just start to think that that's what's going to happen. But the better agents will start to stock their pipeline for next year. So there is property that's out there. So if you have the right conversations with the right people and ask the right questions, there's property to be found. I do think that there is a window of buying which is really good between now and the end of the year. I think if you wait until the new year, you're going to find probably more competition in the market. And then the other thing that will come from that is, are there going to be more serious conversations about interest rate cuts to come? And if that's what is going to happen, there'll probably be another push in terms of property prices. Not crazy like 2021, but definitely just more buyers entering the market and going, now is probably the time to buy. If we can afford it at this price, let's buy and ride the wave back down before property prices start to push and get even higher again.
Agreed. So if you want to buy between now and the end of the year, it's a great time. There's going to be more opportunity. Ask the right questions and go hard.
That's it.
Jacob, thank you.
Thank you for having me.